Well, good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome,
Glad
Buck.
to be here.
We often start these conversations about queries as to how your political aspirations are working out. I mean, do you want to tell our audience about that? I mean, how are things going right now? The election is coming up. I mean, there's a Georgia Senate seat in play. The governorship's in play. Any thoughts? Do you think it's premature to say anything at this point? Don't comment. All right. Well, I'm going to let. I will. All right. I will. I will take that as. I will take that as more to follow. That's what I'll take.
You
that
may think that. You may very well think that.
We'll learn more about it. We'll learn more about it later. Now, we've had conversations recently about science fiction and how there may be some relationship between science fiction, our world to come, what can be extracted from knowledge of that genre. And you apparently have tremendous insight into a lot of that, and you've been interested in that. We've talked about some books and stories that appeal to you. Are there others out there? And have science fiction stories that they often interface with just fiction alone, and to some degree, almost anything set in the future. Does that mean there's science fiction in it? Any story that's in the future means science fiction?
Not necessarily. I mean, for instance, we were speaking in our last episode of Mechanical for Leibowitz, which certainly is set in a future world post-nuclear cataclysm. Well, certainly nuclear weapons are sadly not science fiction. They are all too real. So the cause of that cataclysm there was nothing science fiction about that. I don't think any technology occurred in that novel that amounted to science fiction. So it's set in the future, but it's not science fiction. It would be conjectural, but that's different from.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is speculation is
speculative fiction,
about things are almost part of fiction. I mean, and so if the field is really quite open.
Yes.
You can really if you're a writer or a producer of the future, you can really just go almost any direction with it, and it really opens up all kinds of venues to make comments about our world. And so there is a certain rhetorical force in science fiction, and we spoke about that last time, attempting to point out defects in our world situation, and possibly if things aren't corrected, the train will go off the tracks.
Yes.
There's that going on.
Yes. And I will say, just to muddy the waters a little bit further, of course, two of the most famous science fiction franchises in human history. One is set not in the future, it is set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes.
And yet it would certainly, Star Wars, of course, and it would certainly be considered, at least to a degree, science fiction. Another one, the timing is uncertain, and this is Battlestar Galactica. It seems to be set perhaps contemporaneously, but someplace else. And I don't know how we got away in our last episode without me mentioning the reimagined Battlestar Galactica that was about 20 years ago, which is not just the best science fiction that I have ever seen on the screen. It is some of the best television of any genre. The acting, the writing, the philosophical insights, the action, just amazing at every level.
Well, maybe you can, I mean, I can't really recollect, my wasted adulthood watching that. I'm not sure I watched much of it. But the title means a battle star. I mean, it has a good ring to it. So is a human conflict going on? The humans are resisting some evil forces?
Yes, that's overall that the 12 colonies, each one on a different planet, created an artificial intelligence known as the Cylons. This artificial intelligence became sentient and rebelled, and therefore there was a war between the humans of the colonies and this artificial life that it had created. A truce was declared, but the battle stars were the warships that the humans used to defend human civilization. All this was the backstory. When the series begins, the Cylons come back, they nuke the colonies. It's an apocalyptic event, and the Battlestar Galactica, with a small fleet of fugitive ships, set out on a quest for the missing 13th colony known as Earth. And the Cylons are amazing because the human race in the 12 colonies are polytheists. The Cylons are monotheists. Within the humans, you have very devout polytheists, you have those who simply pay it lip service, you have those who don't believe. Same thing in the Cylons. So you have overtones of religious war, of ideological war, you have philosophy. Can a sentient computer have a soul? If you kill a Cylon, are you committing murder? So there are tremendous philosophical questions and ethical questions involved, mixed in with just raw Darwin struggle for survival. It's just an amazing commentary on the human condition and what drives us. It's the only TV show I've ever seen religion treated in a really serious, deep manner.
Well, that's a good recommendation. I mean,
Yes.
if I have the occasion, I try and watch it.
I hope you do.
I don't know if it'll appear, but I'll try and do that. Now, just listening to that, one thing I can extract is this conflict. It seems intrinsic in fiction indeed, the desire for a conflict or desire for demons, if one can say that. That may be a human failing, if I can be slightly philosophical, but the idea of having happiness, perfection, the bright sunshine, no dark clouds, is something the brain is ill-suited to. And if such a situation exists for a person, it's been my experience they create small demons that they have to joust with. So their dog is sick or whatever. The University of Georgia football team lost, whatever the story is. I mean, something is going on back and forth that occupies our desire for conflict and struggle, and then maybe that's part of our hardwired DNA kind of arrangements. Having said that, we can talk about at a distance the limitations that our brain imposes on us. I mean, that might be one slight one. So we have this evolutionary configured brain that's really probably best suited for 100,000 years ago when it was being fashioned, struggling against cave bears, trying to get enough to eat, reproduce, preservation against all kinds of upheavals, and a delicately balance between a more primitive reptilian part of our brain and a higher rational part, and et cetera. Well, this brain seems to be always there. It's difficult to change it. And so from an evolutionary point of view, the idea that we're going to have these repeated upheavals, we've discussed this before, the cyclical direction of our species. Well, we're going to make a lot of progress, and then boom, we'll screw it up. We'll make some progress, and boom, we'll screw it up. One of the, I think, things that have appeared, as you talked about the Battlestar Galactica in science fiction, is the idea that machines will create a whole nother species that will not have these limitations, and we can sort of create in a godlike way. We're going to put some other creature there that will not have our imperfections, and having done that, there will be some kind of conflict between ourselves and the species we've created. It seems to be a common kind of idea in science fiction. And having said that, I think it begs the question, if we're creating our world today, how much do we really need humans? if machines are getting better and better and better, it used to be, well, my purpose in life is to get food for my family, and I do that by working hard in the fields all day, or maybe I catch fish, or I shoot birds, or whatever I do here, and bring food home. But that appears to be less and less a necessity, because machines do more and more and more, and humans become less and less needed. And one could imagine a circumstance which science fiction kind of talks about, that in a way, machines are becoming our servants, kind of our wise servants, and they may overwhelm us. I think there seems to be a rather common theme. So I get Prometheus. There's I don't know if that's something out there. I don't know if you've seen the movie or something.
The movie Prometheus?
Yeah, and so
by Ridley Scott.
Right,
yes, of course.
Right. The end, of course, good. And the end of it is the sort of the mechanical hominid that's been fashioned is really going to, in the end, do the species in. I think that's the end of it. Am I right?
That's actually not Prometheus. I think that's.
Isn't this? Well, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was the second. There was another. It was a several part thing.
Well,
and the last part was they were on this adventure on the other planet or whatever. All these things were happening, and then the deal was that there was a hominid servant that is final.
Oh yes.
The final is unbeknownst to everybody. The final deal was he was kind of a double dealer. And his idea was to colonize a new world with these artificial creatures that were superior to humans, not having their.
Well, I think you may be confusing.
Well,
there is an artificial human in Prometheus, but he's not really the big bad. It's an actual biological entity that's the real villain. But yes, the Alien franchise. There are. You have synthetic humans.
I blundered around a little bit. Well, maybe of course, since I only watched this en passant, but I'm happy you set me right on the subject.
I'll give you a couple of others.
But isn't that a theme that seems to be just?
There are two themes, and they're actually ubiquitous. So one of the themes was explored by, and I cannot remember the name of the author, but the title of the book was Colossus. And it was a series of 3 books, and this one was actually made into a movie, Colossus: The Forbin Project, in which Forbin creates, and this is old, dated stuff at this point. This was written back in the '60s, but Forbin creates a supercomputer which is designed to be a defense network against the Soviets. Well, this supercomputer Colossus actually links up to the Soviet supercomputer, and they decide, since their mandate is to protect humanity, they decide the only way to protect humanity is to enslave humanity and control humanity rigidly so humanity cannot destroy itself. And so that's one approach to the idea of computer intelligence. The other is, I would say, the Terminator line of movies, when, once again, we create a defense network called Skynet, and Skynet becomes sentient, and instead of deciding that the best way to fulfill its mandate is to enslave us, Skynet just decides we're superfluous, and it declares war on us and tries to exterminate us. And it does not quite manage it, but the whole Terminator series is how human beings fight back against Skynet trying to kill us all. So.
Is there a theme of this also? I was sort of making the point, the need for demons. Humans have become so powerful. I mean, what possible demon can reduplicate the stories about cave bears around the Neolithic fire? Well, there was a great cave bear that came upon us, and it has to be some kind of extraordinary thing. It can't be just a little cave bear that does this. And so science fiction creates the demons that are powerful enough to do us in here.
Yes, and sometimes those demons are of our own creation, and that concept goes all the way back to the Jewish idea of the golem, or Frankenstein's monster, which Frankenstein is in many ways the first science fiction novel, or the Terminator, or Colossus, or the Cylons. Or they can be a completely different entity. So H.G. Wells's Martians, for instance, or some entity like the creators of the Stargate in 2001, so fantastically far advanced over us by millions of years that we cannot even comprehend them. And was it Arthur C. Clarke who said that any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic? So
that's a really good turn of phrase. Well, now let me, on that subject, sort of go back to even possibly earlier science fiction. And I'm going to bring up Odysseus, his travels, and which is we'll say that's 2,800 years ago or so, floating around, and the adventures that he had on this journey, in which the part of the human story, a sea journey, it's going to the stars possibly. Let's see, Odysseus is out there in a way like Captain Kirk on the Enterprise. Yes. There's a lot of similarities. And his struggles that he meets, the cave dweller there that had the one eye.
The Cyclops.
The Cyclops,
yeah.
right. The one-eyed person. So sundry strong, powerful, including the women. Is that right? Or whatever.
The Amazons, was it?
No, well, I know who was the seductive person that would.
The sirens.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, and they eat the opium and whatever your male destiny and force and desire to tame the world would be just subdued by sensuality. So different kinds of demons are there. I mean, you could, if you wanted to parse that out, it would be quite a journey, I would say that. But it's obviously a rather male-oriented story. I think we could say that. I don't know how the feminists these days deconstruct that. It'd be an interesting thing, though. I don't know if they...
And perhaps Odysseus was coming up with all this stuff to tell his wife, listen, I was really trying to get home.
She was happily trying to, whatever it is, for 20 years, faithful for him. But having said that, there is the cave around the Neolithic fire at night, telling stories, and demons appear, and it's sort of getting in touch with that human need in a way. Maybe it's science fiction do that.
I think so. I think it really does, because there's always the human wondering about the inexplicable. Who am I? What am I doing here? What is our species? What's the point? There's Joseph Conrad in a decidedly non-science fiction novella, or is it novella? I've always said novella. It seems to work better. But he describes this phenomenon as like diamonds flashing in the night of time. But that really does work in a science fiction level, that the universe, for any practical purpose of ours, is infinite. It's going to remain infinite. And so there is mystery out there that will never be solved, and many stories to be told long after we've understood all the cave bears. So
now, on that subject, just to keep at it, is there a gender relationship with science fiction? In other words, if the number of people that are intrigued by it, I mean, whatever, are they preponderantly male? Maybe I'm being slightly whatever. And is the reason for that the male's brains are hardwired for this war? And in a way, maybe that's the male equivalent of childbirth, the desire for war, struggle, physical combat, subduing evil in sort of a linear way, if I can phrase it that way. Any comments about that? Are there feminine, and just looking at your knowledge of science fiction, is there a feminine heroine, shall I say, that jousted with evil forces in science fiction?
Well, that's a very broad question, and I would guess, and we were talking a little bit before the segment began about video gaming, it seems like most of the people involved in science fiction and gaming, whether it be as producers or consumers, tend to be male, but that's just a tendency. The immediate heroine that comes to mind is the creation of a male author, and her name is Honor Harrington. And she is essentially Horatio Hornblower in space, even down to her initials. She's an officer in the Royal Manticoran Navy. She is fighting the People's Republic of Haven, and it's the Napoleonic Wars said again, but she is the creation of a male author. On the other hand, you have, for instance, The Handmaid's Tale, and I'm having another senior moment here, very famous Canadian author, female. This novel was written, I think, in the 1970s. It's not straight science fiction, it's more dystopian, but this has been turned into a very well-received TV show, and it's written by a woman. It's written, I think, mainly for women, although I think that she would like a male audience to try and take the lessons. It's very much a feminist commentary on the way the patriarchy is destroying things. So you can certainly find some very famous female contributions to the genre. Although, on reflection, I think they tend to be more fantasy than science fiction. One of my favorite fantasy series is by a woman, Anne Bishop, called The Black Jewels. But once again, that's more fantasy, less science fiction. So interesting thought.
Well, I mean, yes, and so we get some kind of reflection. I mean, is that I won't get too far into this, but the fiction that's created or the of any type is reflective of something that's intrinsic in the human condition.
Testosterone.
Well, I mean, also estrogen or progesterone. I mean, so different people have different fantasies, and in some ways, these fantasies reflect.
Margaret Atwood. I'm sorry, I had to get it out there because it was an insult for me not to know her name.
Margaret Atwood.
Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale, Arts and Craig.
Canadian.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and so if there's the fiction that's produced, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the male-oriented science fiction is probably lots of blood and shooting people and blowing them up or whatever. Maybe a little more like that, and that's not. I guess it has some attraction for everyone of all genders.
Yes.
All 4 or 5 genders we have, but it has attraction.
Yes.
It has some attraction. But nevertheless, I mean, it's maybe science fiction more in that direction. And I will then now ask this question. I think you've been, as I understand it, to the Star Wars. They have these like get-togethers, people dress.
Well, Dragon Con.
Is that what it is? Yes. What is that?
Which is one of the biggest conventions of its type anywhere, as far as I know, in the world. It meets in Atlanta. It meets annually over Labor Day weekend. And before COVID hit, it was peaking out at something like 85,000 attendees, packed into about 5 city blocks in the heart of downtown Atlanta. And every one of them is a geek. Many of them dress up as some of their favorite characters or even as a character that they themselves have created. There are panels 24 hours a day. One of my favorite tracks is the War College panel, which is actually run by former faculty of the Naval War College. It's really Revenge of the Nerds. I would not want to be a member of the varsity football team caught in that crowd because it would be they take them into the back alley and beat them up. But it is such a creative group of people looking at the world in new and different ways. They are unconventional. They're free spirits, and it's just an amazing thing.
Now, just to probe that, is there any predisposition, gender predisposition for people? I'm assuming females are there, but is it preponderantly? Can you say? It'd be a good question.
I would say it's roughly evenly divided.
Is that right?
Yeah,
well, I think that's
really
a good point. Isn't it?
So some of my closest associates up there are female, and the name is cosplayers, costume play. That I have some friends who spend literally the entire year designing these elaborate costumes that they will wear for one day.
It's kind of like Carnival in Rio, so to speak, or with some differences, but I mean, it's
very similar, similar. But once again, there are panels you can meet and you can discuss. For instance, one of the best panels I ever went to was a discussion of a Marvel series called The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and it was all about the PTSD of Bucky Barnes, who had been a World War II soldier and was having to deal with some horrible things he did. It's just an amazing intellectual exercise to go to one of these things and to see what people can do when they get outside the box. Now,
Well,
of course, there's a lot of partying that goes on at night
yes,
too. but, yeah.
yes. Well, I mean, what is there? Is there I know nothing about it, but is there a predisposition for maybe Star Wars characters, or is, let's see, Tolkien? Is there people dressed up like hobbits or something?
Yes. There is. Tolkien has a very big presence. Star Wars a big presence. Star Trek a big presence. Yes, just about anything. If it's pop culture, then you'll find it. They have an observatory set up out on the back patio of the Hilton, so you can look at the sun in the daytime, the moon at night. There is a skeptics track. So if you believe in magic, you can go to one track, and if you believe in skepticism, you can go to another track. If you want to do military history, that's a track that I attend a lot. So, yeah.
Well, is there? I mean, I'll get into this some more. Is there a desire for an alternate reality? I mean, do people? I'm going to my demon thing here, or the joy of imagining that you're struggling against something, or you're in this elevated life, different life, where great events are occurring, important great events are happening all around you, and in general, maybe the contemporary life is, you might use the word boring compared with that. You're just you wake up and brush your teeth and tie your shoes and walk to work or do whatever, and you have a hamburger for lunch and pet the dog, come home, pet the dog.
We haven't even gotten into the world of online gaming or virtual reality yet, in which you can flee because your real world is perhaps intolerable. I am currently reading a book right now called Ready Player One, set 20 or 30 years in the future. And virtual reality seems so real that you can almost not tell the difference. And if you're living in an abusive home and you go to a terrible school,
right.
You just go into the virtual world. I mean, it's a better place.
We're getting near our end here, but can you comment on the metaverse? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Is the idea, to put it in a sentence or two, that the brain being what it is, if it really acts itself out, it'll finally injure everyone and we'll just have a cyclical crash. But if we have a alternative universe where we just put our little our little glasses on, and we find ourselves just hypnotized by another reality in which we never hurt people, we never injure anyone, and we can sort of glorify our higher aspirations.
Well, I think that's a lot to unpack near the end of this episode. We probably need another episode for it. But the problem is, as matters stand today, we can't live 24/7 in that metaverse. We have to come out and live in this one. And if we've gotten used to, say, venting our emotions explosively in the metaverse, if we bring that back with us into this universe, it could be counterproductive.
Well, I think we're ending our this evening's session, but I believe we're on the cusp of some important discussion. So we'll continue with this. So thank you so much for being here, Buck. Thank you.
Once again, live long and prosper.
Let's hope so.
Indeed.
Right. Good night.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. Endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.